this example is a lot easier than the previous example when it is about taking decisions, because here it's clear we should decide whether we play knight b6 or we play something else. Because only with knight b6 we may win material, or other moves are not leading to any material wins. Basically, I can also ask you the question, shall we play knight b6 or shall we play a3, which is kind of a prophylactical move, as we can see that there is some pressure on c1, and a3 would stabilize a little bit the king's position, because with a3 we get some luft on a2. Okay. So now let's see. Knight b6 must have been calculated by Nigel Short, and it was dismissed by him because he was afraid of the upcoming issues. And now when we look at this position from the black's point of view, again, the help of tactical indicators can help in order to find the most appealing tactical moves or eventually right decisions. So what kind of tactical indications are given? We see a mating square on c1. This is always like a tactical indicator, because if you see mating squares, better to pay attention to. Now we also see that there is some opposition on the d file. We said pieces in a row diagonal of file should we always pay attention to, and it doesn't matter of what color are these pieces. Important is that we have here some issue. Moreover, the rook on d1 is unprotected, and we know that unprotected pieces are also tactical indications, and here this might be a weakness in white's camp. So when we basically add all these things together, we can see there is a mating square on c1, dependency on the rook d1 protecting that square, and the opposition of the queen and the rook. That leads us to, in my opinion, two candidate moves to be observed, knight b3 and knight e2. Let's check knight b3. The idea is the following. We threat a checkmate and we attack the rook on d1. The rook cannot take the queen, that's obvious, because it will not help against the checkmate. The same is that, well, the knight takes on d7, there's also the checkmate. So the only move which makes sense is queen takes b3. Now we have the luxury that the queen protects on d1, so a kind of sacrifice here leads nowhere. And, well, we can say quite quickly that knight b3 is not working. Let's check knight e2. This looks much more dangerous, because now on e2 we can take the knight. But then, for example, like the rook on d1 is only protected by the bishop, which is not useful, because the rook on d1 has a lifetime job protecting white's king from mate. So that means after bishop takes c2, queen takes d1, bishop takes d1 is forced, and rook c1, black is winning. So far, so good. And this is actually, I believe, what Nigel Short must have calculated. And here in this moment he stopped and he got the conclusion that black must be winning. But what did he forget? When we calculate variations, it's not only about the decision-making process, but it's a kind of general recipe which is quite useful. What we should do is, we should, of course, always have a selection of candidate moves. How to find candidate moves, we already see, or we already have learned that tactical indicators or like tactical indications are a good guide for that. But apart from that, we should also follow the rule of the algorithm of calculation, which means we should have a system. And the best system, in my opinion, is to look for checks, then for captures, moves with a threat, and so-called prophylactical moves. Like a3 was what Nigel actually played in the game. So Nigel must have not done this job, because if after knight e2 he would have looked for checks, he would have at least, well, take attention to queen f8, or to put attention to rook e8. Both moves are checks, and therefore they should be, of course, observed. But honestly speaking, like, they don't look like the most natural moves on the planet, so your intuition may not guide you there. But especially when you are a player who has less experience and you are not as strong, let's say, as a candidate master or like a grandmaster and so on, then it's quite useful to have a system or to follow an algorithm, because it will help you. And it may help you better than with a professional player who would everything do by intuition or by his own experience, like Nigel did, and therefore he didn't even check out probably queen f8 check or rook e8, because if he had lost a single thought on one of these two moves, he might have realized that actually it looks much more interesting than your intuition would tell. Let's check first rook e8, because we should, according to the rules of calculation. Here, after rook e8 check, the problem is that the queen can simply take. Now we don't attack the queen anymore. We gave a rook, and it's not clear if he gained much, because, okay, after knight takes c8, in the worst case, we take back on c8, you take on e2, and, well, I think even we win material. For example, like rook takes c8. If you take on e2, I take back with the queen and I have something up. Otherwise, if you pin, for example, still like black is not in danger at all. It is white who has to be, black is not in danger at all. It's white who has to be very cautious. So we can dismiss rook e8 check kind of easily. Let's go for queen f8 check. Now, easy to tell that if the king takes, the problem is that the queen on d7 suddenly is hanging with a check. So that means after knight takes d7 check, king g8 is forced. Now we can even go for a Zwischenzug with knight takes f6. Let's say you take with a pawn to keep the threat on c1. Bishop takes e2, but we don't have any more sacrifices, and we protect c1, and white is winning. So that's why king f8 is easy to rule out. Rook takes f8 is the alternative, but also this move has a drawback, because c1 is not a mating square anymore, as only one piece attacks it, and here we have one piece protecting it. Okay, the knight as well, but still it's not sufficient. So now knight takes d7 simply as one follow-up, and here already like we attack the rook, we attack the bishop, and the knight is still attacked, and we would at least get back one of the pieces, but I think we just win material because everything is hanging. If you play something along the lines like knight d4, the easiest solution is, well, I'm not even sure what is the easiest because there are millions, but probably just to take on f6 and to take on d4 and have a piece up. And if after knight takes d7 you move the rook, for example, to c8, then we can simply take on f6 again with a check, and then take on e2, and we have the same position basically, and white is winning. So that means knight b6 would have been the right decision, but as I said, it's really sometimes, at least from the emotional point of view, not easy to do such a decision when you see that there's danger in your camp. And therefore, like, in order to recognize the danger, tactical indications can help as one thing. And in order to calculate then all these problems in the right way, it's good to have an algorithm of calculation, because that would help you not to miss out things, as Nigel did in the game. Anyway, for me, it was kind of astonishing. By the way, last but not least, Nigel played a3, which would be in the category of the algorithm of calculation, the prophylactical move, which comes as number 4. Just, well, as a kind of general note. But yeah, knight b6 would have done the issue. He still won the game, but anyway, here knight b6 was a great opportunity he missed.